I was standing in the lobby of a glass and steel office tower on Westheimer Road in Houston, a $4.2 million commercial lease agreement tucked under my arm, when my phone buzzed. Isolda's name on the screen. Nothing unusual. She called maybe twice a week, sometimes to ask about dinner plans, sometimes to remind me about a dry cleaning pickup, sometimes just to fill the silence that had been growing between us for longer than I wanted to admit. I stepped away from the elevator bank, pressed the phone to my ear, and said what I always said. "Hey, everything okay?" That's when she told me. "Raymond." Her voice had a brightness to it I hadn't heard in months. Not the brightness of happiness, though. The brightness of someone who's been rehearsing something and is finally saying it out loud. "I need you to know that I filed for divorce today. I also signed a purchase agreement on the house. The buyer wants to close in 30 days. I've already started packing my things." I didn't say anything. The sound of Houston traffic filtered through the revolving door behind me. "I'm going to start over," she continued, "with someone who actually sees me, someone who doesn't make me feel like a footnote in his own life." Then she laughed. Not a nervous laugh, a victorious one. And I said the only two words I could think of, the two words that would make everything that happened next possible. "Sounds good." She paused. I think she expected tears, maybe begging. Certainly not that. "Sounds good?" she repeated. "Yeah," I said. "I'll see you when I get back." And I hung up. And I smiled, because Isolda had just made the second biggest mistake of her life. The biggest one she'd already made 3 months earlier. She just didn't know I knew about it yet. Before I go any further, if this story is hitting close to home for you, if you've ever had the floor pulled out from under you and had to find a way to stand back up, I want you to hit that subscribe button right now. Leave a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. And give this video a like if you believe that quiet preparation beats loud threats every single time. Now let me tell you everything. My name is Raymond Caulfield. I'm 46 years old and I've spent the last 17 years building a commercial real estate brokerage in Dallas, Texas. Not the glamorous kind you see on television. The kind where you wake up before sunrise to drive out to industrial parks in Garland and Grand Prairie, where you negotiate warehouse leases with manufacturing companies that have never once been featured on a magazine cover. The kind of work that is invisible and essential and pays exceptionally well for those willing to do it without fanfare. I grew up in Mesquite, Texas, east of Dallas, in a neighborhood where ambition wasn't exactly encouraged. My father worked 31 years at a freight company before his back gave out. My mother cleaned offices downtown. They were good people who gave me everything they had, which wasn't much in dollars, but was more than enough in character. When I graduated from University of Texas at Arlington with a real estate license and a beat-up Ford Ranger, I told my father I was going to be the best commercial broker in North Texas. He didn't doubt me for a second. That always meant everything to me. By the time I met Isolda, I had built Caulfield Property Group from nothing into a firm with 12 agents, 3 administrative staff, and annual commissions that most people in this business would consider exceptional. I wasn't wealthy in the way that people throw that word around carelessly, but I had built something real, something with my name on it. I met Isolda Vance at a charity auction benefiting the Dallas Arboretum. She was 38 at the time, an interior designer with a small but growing firm in uptown Dallas. She had the kind of effortless elegance that made a room feel like it was rotating slowly around her. Dark auburn hair, eyes the color of old copper. She could walk into a function like she'd been expected, even when she hadn't. We dated for 14 months and married in the spring, on a rooftop overlooking the Dallas skyline. 60 guests, simple ceremony. Her sister Phoebe cried through the entire vows, which made Isolda laugh, which made me love her completely. For the first 4 years, it was good. It was genuinely good. She grew her design firm. I expanded the brokerage into industrial and medical, office space. We bought a condo in a high-rise in Turtle Creek, 14 floors up, floor-to-ceiling windows, views of the park below. We had dinners that stretched past midnight. We drove out to Marfa one spring and stayed in a converted ranch house and spent 3 days doing almost nothing and being completely content about it. But somewhere between year 4 and year 7, something shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once. It was gradual, the way light fades in the afternoon. You don't notice the exact moment it starts getting dark. You just look up at some point and realize the room has changed. Isolde's design firm had taken on a business partner named Tanner Holcomb. He had arrived from Atlanta with a portfolio full of high-end residential projects and the kind of confidence that fills a room before the door has even fully opened. Tall, 40, salt and pepper hair, the type of man who wears a sports coat to casual events and makes it look intentional. He spoke the language of aesthetics fluently. He knew which wine to order. He had opinions on architecture that he delivered with the calm certainty of someone who had never been wrong about anything. I didn't dislike Tanner immediately. I want to be honest about that. He was charming in the way that certain people are just engineered to be charming, and I had been in sales long enough to recognize the construction beneath the warmth. But Isolde was thrilled about the partnership. Her business was growing. Her work was better. For a while, I told myself I was overthinking it. I stopped overthinking it in February, 7 months before that phone call in Houston. I came home early from a site visit in Frisco. A tenant build-out had been delayed by a permit issue, nothing I could fix that afternoon, and found Isolde sitting on the living room couch. She wasn't doing anything, just sitting. Her phone was face down on the cushion beside her, and her face, when she looked up, did a thing that faces do when they've been caught mid-thought. The expression evaporated too fast, replaced too quickly with something normal and surface level and wrong. "You're home early," she said. "Permit delay," I said. "What are you doing?" "Nothing, just resting." She picked up her phone and went into the bedroom. I stood in the kitchen for a long moment. Then I went to my office and started thinking. I want to be clear about something. I'm not a suspicious man by nature. I spent 17 years in commercial real estate, which means I spent 17 years evaluating risk and reading people and deciding what was worth trusting. The instinct that started talking to me that February afternoon wasn't jealousy. It was the same signal I get when a deal structure doesn't quite add up. When the numbers look right, but something in the foundation is soft. I called a private investigator named Craig Bethel 2 days later. Craig had done background work for me before on potential tenants with questionable financials. He was quiet, thorough, and completely without drama. I told him I needed a full picture of Isolde's recent activities. I wasn't asking him to spy on my wife out of spite. I was asking him to confirm or deny what my professional instincts were already telling me. It took Craig 3 weeks. His report arrived on a Tuesday morning in a plain email with a PDF attachment. I read it at my office desk with the door closed and my assistant holding my calls. She and Tanner Holcomb had been together for at least 5 months. The report included dates, times, locations, a hotel in Deep Ellum, lunch at a bistro in the Design District on a Saturday when Isolde had told me she was meeting a client in Plano, a reservation at a wine bar on Henderson Avenue under Tanner's name, checked in at 7:42 p.m. on a Thursday when I'd been at a client dinner in Irving. I closed the PDF. I put my phone face down on my desk. I looked out the window at the Dallas skyline for a long time. And then I did something that I believe saved me from losing everything. I didn't call her. I didn't go home. I didn't say a single word. Instead, I called my attorney. Clifton Hale had represented me in 3 major commercial transactions and 1 lease dispute that nearly ended a relationship with a client I'd had for 11 years. He was the kind of lawyer who spoke slowly and thought faster than almost anyone I'd ever met. When I explained the situation, he didn't waste time expressing sympathy. He started asking questions. "Is the condo in both names?" "Yes." "Is the mortgage current?" "Yes. Never missed a payment." "Are there any joint investment accounts or business accounts tied to personal finances?" "We have a joint checking and a joint savings. My business accounts are separate LLCs." "Good. Here's what I need you to do." Over the next 3 months, I did exactly what Clifton told me. I moved my personal savings, the money I had accumulated before our marriage, which under Texas law constitutes separate property, into a separate account documented with a clear paper trail establishing its premarital origin. I separated my business income structures more cleanly. I documented every major asset we shared and established clear records of what predated our marriage and what had been built together. I also had a second, very important conversation with Clifton about Tanner Holcomb specifically. Because Craig Bethel hadn't just given me documentation of an affair, he'd given me something else. Something I initially didn't understand the significance of, but Clifton did immediately. Tanner Holcomb had a history. Before Atlanta, there had been Phoenix. Before Phoenix, there had been Nashville. In each city, a variation on the same pattern. A business partnership, usually with a woman, usually involving shared accounts or shared assets, followed by a disappearance. 2 of the women had filed civil suits. 1 had been resolved quietly. The other was still pending in a Maricopa County court. A 3rd woman in Nashville had filed a police report that was eventually closed for lack of evidence. Craig had turned all of this over in 4 weeks of research. He was thorough. Tanner Holcomb wasn't just a man having an affair with my wife. He was a man who had a documented pattern of attaching himself to women with assets and then extracting value before disappearing. And Isolde, my wife, had opened a shared business account with him 6 months ago. Craig had found that too. I sat on all of this. I said nothing. I went home every night and had dinner and asked about her day and watched the news and went to bed and did not say a single word. Because Clifton was very specific. If I wanted to protect myself in the divorce that was coming, the divorce that was clearly coming regardless of what I did, I needed to wait, document, prepare, and do not, under any circumstances, tip my hand. So when that phone call came in the lobby on Westheimer Road in Houston on a Thursday afternoon in October, I was not caught off guard. I was ready. "Sounds good," I said, and I meant it. I drove back to Dallas the next morning. It's a roughly 4-hour drive depending on traffic, and I spent most of it on the phone with Clifton, who had been waiting for me to give him the green light. By the time I crossed over into Dallas County on I-45, 3 things had already been set in motion. First, Clifton had filed the divorce petition that morning. Not a response to her filing. An independent petition, because when he checked the county clerk's records, Isolde's attorney had filed the paperwork, but it hadn't yet been served. I beat her. By hours. Second, Clifton had contacted the real estate attorney who specialized in property disputes, a woman named Dr. Adaeze Nwosu, who had been a professor before she went into practice and who brought an academic precision to everything she touched. The purchase agreement Isolde had signed on our Turtle Creek condo had a problem, a significant one. The condo deed listed both Raymond Allen Caulfield and Isolde Marie Caulfield as owners. Under Texas law, community property cannot be sold or encumbered without the written consent of both spouses. Isolde had signed a purchase agreement on property she did not have the legal authority to sell unilaterally. The agreement was unenforceable. The sale was not going to happen. Third, and this is the part I had to process carefully during that drive, Craig Bethel had sent me an update the night before. Tanner Holcomb had moved $23,000 out of the shared business account he held with Isolde, moved it to an account Craig couldn't immediately trace, and in the last 48 hours, his phone had stopped going to her calls. By the time I pulled into the parking garage beneath our building, I had a very clear picture of what I was going to walk into. The elevator opened on our floor. I could hear Isolde before I reached the door. She was on the phone, her voice high and tight with an anxiety I recognized immediately as the sound of something going very wrong very quickly. I put my key in the lock and let the door open slowly. She was standing at the kitchen counter in clothes she'd clearly slept in, her auburn hair unraveled, her laptop open to what looked like a banking portal. When she looked up and saw me, something moved across her face that I will remember for a long time. It was not the expression of someone who had won. It was the expression of someone who had just looked down and noticed there was no floor beneath them. "Raymond," she set the phone down. "I didn't expect you until tonight." "I drove back early," I said. I set my bag down by the door. "What's going on?" She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at the laptop, looked back at me. "Tanner's not answering my calls," she said finally. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water from the filter on the counter. The one Isolde had picked out, the one that matched the countertops. I took a long sip. "That's unfortunate," I said. She stared at me. "Do you know something?" "Why would I know something about Tanner Holcomb?" She looked at the laptop again. "The bank account. The business account Tanner and I shared for the firm. The money's gone. $23,000. I can't reach him, and the buyer for the condo is saying the purchase agreement might not be valid because—" She stopped. She was putting something together. I watched her do it. "Because your name is on the deed," she finished quietly. "That's correct," I said. "Our names are both on the deed. You can't sell community property without both signatures. Dr. Nwosu, she's a real estate attorney. She'll be sending your attorney a formal letter today explaining the situation. Isolde's hands were flat on the counter, very still. You already have an attorney. I've had an attorney for 3 months. The silence that followed was different from any silence we had shared in 12 years of marriage. It was the silence of recognition, the slow arrival of understanding that the game she thought she was playing had been playing her instead. You knew, she said. I've known since February. She looked at the phone on the counter, the one she'd set down when I walked in. I could see from where I stood that she'd been trying to reach Tanner 17 times in the last 2 hours. He's not coming, Isolde. I kept my voice level. I wasn't angry. I had been angry for months, in the privacy of my car, and my office, and the long drives across North Texas that are the real geography of my life. But here, in this moment, I was past anger. I was standing on the far side of it. Craig Bethel, the investigator I hired in February, he found Tanner's history, Nashville, Phoenix, Atlanta. He does this. He attaches himself to women with businesses and assets, builds trust, moves money, and disappears. He's done it at least 3 times that we can document. Isolde was not moving. The $23,000 he moved out of your business account, I continued, is likely gone. You may want to file a police report. Dr. Nwosu can advise you on the civil options, though given that Tanner appears to have already left the state based on Craig's last check-in, recovery is going to be difficult. You're telling me to call the police, she said. Her voice had dropped to something almost inaudible. I'm telling you what your options are. I'm not your enemy, Isolde. I never was. But I'm also not going to pretend the last several months haven't happened, and I'm not going to allow myself to be financially destroyed because someone else made choices I wasn't part of. She sat down on one of the kitchen stools, the same stools she had picked out at a shop in the design district when we first moved in. She'd deliberated over them for 40 minutes. I'd stood there the whole time because I was happy to let her get exactly what she wanted. How long have you been planning this? She asked. Planning what? Protecting myself? Since February? Filing for divorce? Clifton filed this morning. Something crossed her face at that. You filed first. Yes. She put her hands over her face. Sat there for a long moment. When she lowered them, she looked exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Tanner told me you were hiding money, she said. He told me, you had offshore accounts that I didn't know about, that you were going to leave me with nothing. I looked at her carefully. I had been in commercial real estate for 17 years. I knew exactly what a structure built on deliberate misinformation looked like. I knew how it was constructed. I knew what it was for. Tanner needed you to believe I was the threat, I said, because if you were focused on what you thought I was doing, you wouldn't look at what he was actually doing. She stared at the kitchen counter. The business account, she said softly. He suggested I open it, said we needed to keep the partnership finances separate from my personal accounts. I thought it was professional, organized. It was organized, I said. That's how he works. There is a specific kind of grief that comes not just from loss, but from the recognition that you were maneuvered, that your own intelligence and good faith were used as the mechanism of your destruction. I have seen it in business negotiations gone wrong. I saw it on Isolde's face that afternoon in the kitchen of the condo we had shared for 9 years. I am not going to tell you that I felt nothing. I had loved this woman. I had built a life around her. I had stood on a rooftop overlooking Dallas on a spring evening and meant every word I said. But I had also spent 3 months watching the evidence arrive in quiet installments, and somewhere in those months I had grieved most of what needed grieving. What was left in that kitchen was not cruelty, it was clarity. What happens now? She asked. Clifton will be in contact with your attorney. We have a clear accounting of separate and community property. The business accounts are already documented. The condo will need to be sold legitimately with both signatures or bought out by one party at fair market value. I picked up my bag from by the door. I'm staying at the Crescent tonight. Give yourself some time to make calls. Raymond. She said my name the way she used to say it, something underneath the word that was different from the surface of it. I'm sorry. I stood at the door for a moment. I know you are, I said. It doesn't fix anything, but I know you are. And I left. The divorce took 11 months. It was not the catastrophe Isolde had been positioning it to be because there was no catastrophe available to her. The accounts were clean. The property documentation was clean. Clifton Hale had ensured that everything Raymond Caulfield had built before and during that marriage was accounted for with precision. In Texas, community property is divided equitably. We sold the Turtle Creek condo and split the equity. Isolde kept her design firm, minus the money Tanner had taken, minus the debt she had accrued during the months she had been planning a future that evaporated the moment he stopped answering her calls. Tanner Holcomb was arrested 4 months after he left Dallas. He had surfaced in Denver, where he had attached himself to a woman who ran a high-end boutique hotel. A combined effort from Craig Bethel, the 2 women from Phoenix and Nashville who had filed civil suits, and a federal agent who had been building a wire fraud case for 2 years brought him to a federal courtroom in Denver on 7 counts. I was asked to provide a statement, which I did. He is currently serving a 6-year sentence at a federal correctional institution in Colorado. Isolde testified in that case, too. It wasn't comfortable for either of us. We sat in the same courthouse hallway for 40 minutes without speaking. But she was composed and thorough and told the truth, which I respected. Whatever she had been in the last year of our marriage, she had enough left in her to do that right. I want to tell you something about the morning after that phone call in Houston. I sat in my car in the parking garage of the office building on Westheimer Road for about 10 minutes before I went back inside. Not to process, not to cry. I had already done both of those things in private. I sat there because I wanted to be very clear about something with myself before I said, "Sounds good," and drove away. I was not winning. There is no winning in the destruction of a marriage you built with real effort and real love. There is only deciding how you're going to come out the other side, whether you're going to be the person who reacts in ways that cost you everything, or the person who absorbs the blow and thinks 2 steps ahead. My father was a freight company worker for 31 years. He taught me very few things about business and an enormous number of things about character. He used to say that the loudest man in a negotiation is almost never the most prepared one. He wasn't talking about real estate. He was talking about life. He learned it the hard way, the way people from Mesquite, Texas learn most things. I thought about him that day in that parking garage. Then I went back inside and closed my $4 million lease. Today I'm still in Dallas. Caulfield Property Group has 15 agents now. We expanded into a second office in Fort Worth last spring. My father drove up from Mesquite for the opening and stood in the doorway of the new office on Camp Bowie Boulevard, with his arms crossed, and didn't say anything for a long time, which is exactly what he does when he's proud of something. I'm not going to tell you that everything is fine and the hard part is over, and that I found happiness on the other side of loss and it was worth it. Real life doesn't work that cleanly. But I'm going to tell you that the 2 words I said in that Houston lobby, the ones that sounded like surrender and were actually the beginning of everything, I don't regret them for a second. Sounds good. Because I had already done the work. Because I had spent 3 months being exactly as quiet and exactly as prepared as the situation required. Because when someone shows you who they are, the worst thing you can do is react before you're ready. She called expecting debris. She got a man who had already cleared the site and was ready to build. My take: the power of sounds good. This is the ultimate lesson in emotional intelligence and tactical patience. Raymond isn't just a real estate broker, he's a chess player. Most men, the second they found that PDF from the investigator, would have burned the house down. But Raymond? He went home, ate dinner, and watched the news for 3 months while his wife and her con artist partner plotted his ruin. When Isolde called him in that lobby to drop the bomb, she expected a breakdown. Instead, she got the most terrifying 2 words in the English language. Sounds good. Why? Because Raymond had already done the math. He didn't just protect his money, he let Isolde's own mistakes trap her. He knew Tanner was a predator, and he knew the condo couldn't be sold. He didn't stop her because he wanted her to feel the full weight of the floor disappearing beneath her feet. My takeaway? The loudest person in the room is the weakest. The one who says sounds good while holding a $4.2 million contract? That's the one you should fear. Raymond didn't lose a marriage. He cut off a parasite and saved his legacy. Absolute legend.